In this video, we'll look at forms of consecrated life that are distinct from religious life. Before you watch this video, I would recommend checking out the video on religious life because this video will contain some comparisons to it. To be consecrated means to be set apart. Those who enter consecrated life are set apart by God for a particular mission. And this category of vocations does include those men and women belonging to religious life, but since that's the most common form of consecrated life, it got its own whole video. This video focuses on consecrated virginity, diocesan hermits, and secular institutes. We'll also touch on the order of widows and on single life. Consecrated virginity is the oldest form of consecrated life in the Church and is open only to women. From the beginning of Christianity, there were women who felt called to give their whole lives to God and to remain in a perpetually celibate state. Women received a consecration and made a vow to live as spouses of Christ and remain perpetual virgins. At some point in the first few centuries of the Church, an official rite of consecration was developed. Early consecrated virgins were closely connected with the diocesan bishop, and they served the people of God in their diocese. Many church fathers used the term Ordo Virginum, which is Latin for Order of Virgins, to refer to those who received the consecration, and this term is still used today to describe the body of consecrated virgins worldwide. Some early consecrated virgins were Saints Agnes, Marcellina, and Agatha. As communities of religious life developed in the Middle Ages, the rite of consecration of virgins fell into disuse. However, in the years leading up to the Second Vatican Council, there were women who desired to receive the consecration and who advocated for its return. In 1970, a renewed rite of consecration of virgins living in the world was promulgated. Currently, there are around 5,000 consecrated virgins in the world, of which I am one, with many more women receiving the consecration every year. Similar to women religious, consecrated virgins live lives of deep prayer and penance, praying and sacrificing for the people of God. Consecrated at the hands of her diocesan bishop, the consecrated virgin has a special relationship with him and prays in a special way for the clergy and people of her diocese. She provides for her own needs, and therefore most consecrated virgins have regular jobs. They live in this life in an anticipated way what every soul is called to in eternity, marriage with God. Generally, women cannot begin formation until they are at least 25 years of age. Formation involves 1 to 2 years of an initial stage called aspirancy, followed by 2 to 3 years of more intensive theological, spiritual, and personal formation. Instead of professing vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, which are the vows that other consecrated persons make, women become consecrated virgins through the bishop's prayerful invocation over her on the day of her consecration. The consecration is done one time and is lifelong, so the Church takes great care to ensure that those women who receive it have discerned well and are willing and able to persevere in perpetual virginity for the whole of their lives. Consecrated virgins do not wear habits, but wear a wedding ring as a sign of their spousal relationship to Jesus. Next, we move to diocesan hermits. Diocesan hermits can be men or women, and those called to this vocation live a life of solitude, penance, and prayer. Canon law, which is a set of laws that govern the internal administration and hierarchy of the Church, says this: a hermit is recognized in the law as one dedicated to God in a consecrated life if he or she publicly professes the 3 evangelical counsels confirmed by a vow or other sacred bond in the hands of the diocesan bishop and observes his or her own plan of life under his direction. This means that the vocation is also an eschatological one, that is, pointing to the realities of heaven. Hermits live alone and spend their lives withdrawn from the daily cares of the world in a stricter way. They do not, for example, use social media or spend their time watching Netflix. They are, in some sense, withdrawing into the desert after the example of the Desert Fathers, who literally lived in the desert and fasted and prayed for their own salvation and the salvation of the world. There's no established rite for the consecration of hermits, but when one enters into this life, there is a profession of vows that is received by the bishop. Those eligible for this vocation are generally at least 30 years old, have deep personal and spiritual maturity, and are psychologically stable with the capacity for periods of prolonged silence and solitude. Next, we move on to secular institutes. Though the history of secular institutes goes back to the 16th century, they were only formally recognized in church law in 1947. Canon law says, a secular institute is an institute of consecrated life in which the Christian faithful living in the world strive for the perfection of charity and work for the sanctification of the world, especially from within. Similar to those in religious life, those in secular institutes profess vows or promises of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but similar to consecrated virginity, they exercise their ministry of prayer and presence embedded in the world and not separated from it. Members often do not live together, although they may choose to, but all members live the same spirituality and general way of life as given by the institute's founder or foundress. Members generally work in the world to support themselves and fulfill the mission and obligations of the Institute within their everyday life. They don't usually wear habits or other visual signifiers of their vocation, and they bring the presence of Christ to the world wherever they are. Each secular institute has different guidelines regarding ages of eligibility, discernment processes, and formation. There are approximately 184 secular institutes in the world, with about 25,000 members total. Now on to the order of widows, which likely existed in the early church. Paul's letter to Timothy says, "Let a widow be enrolled if she is not less than 60 years of age, having been the wife of one husband, and she must be well attested for her good deeds, as one who has brought up children, shown hospitality, washed the feet of the saints, relieved the afflicted, and devoted herself to doing good in every way." It was an order of service and prayer where those who were widowed did not remarry, but it went out of existence in around the 4th century. There have been calls for its rebirth, so we'll see where it goes in the coming years. And now, onto a thornier topic, single life in the church. Though some refer to consecrated virginity, those in secular institutes, and diocesan hermits as single, this is incorrect. All those in consecrated life are not considered to be single. They are considered to be completely set apart for God, and in varying ways, depending on the vocation, to be united to God in soul and body exclusively. For example, consecrated virgins are spouses of Christ. When we're speaking about the possibility of a vocation to single life, we're speaking specifically of those who are not married, ordained, or in any form of consecrated life. From the outset, it's helpful to say that there are a lot of opinions and possibilities with respect to a vocation to single life, but there is no definitive declaration from the Church. One diocesan website may have a whole page on the vocation to single life, but another may say there is no single life vocation. However, we can say some definite things. We do know that vocations are a call from God to some way or form of life that corresponds to how He created us to love. For most people, this would be marriage. For some others, priesthood, religious life, or another form of consecrated life. If we were to speak about a vocation to single life, it would mean that it cannot be the same as the default single state that we are all born into. Someone does not have a vocation to the single life as a passing thing while they are discerning their permanent vocation. Vocations also require commitment. God calls, and in freedom we respond with a commitment to live in a concrete way the vocation He is calling us to. For example, for marriage and religious life, this is signified by the vows in marriage or the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience for religious life. For priesthood, it's signified by ordination. So if we were to speak about the single life as a vocation, then it would have to include these elements: call, discernment in freedom, and response through commitment. It is absolutely possible for people to feel called by God to remain single for example, to dedicate their lives to missionary work, and to discern that call well with a spiritual director and make a private vow of celibacy. Currently, there is no public means established for recognizing the single vocation, such as a rite of consecration. However, the Church leaves open the possibility of new forms of consecrated life, which could include a public recognition of single vocations. It may be possible that the Holy Spirit is doing something new in our time, and that questions around single life and vocations are being raised because the Lord wishes to clarify them and bring something about that we have not yet considered. Just a closing note for all who are single, for whatever reason, and who are wrestling with any kind of lack of clarity regarding your vocation. You are loved, and your place in the Church and in the world is of huge importance. You are not insignificant or shut out from holiness. God has a plan for you, just as He does with all of us. He created you in this time and place, and there's a reason for it, even if it's still becoming clear. Even if it only becomes clear once you're with Him face to face. We're praying for all of you. And if you have questions about consecrated life or any other vocation, you can always contact our Archdiocesan Vocations Director at vocations@ottawa-cornwall.ca. God bless you all.